So we're here for another Meet the Candidates interview. It's the 4th Congressional District that we are talking about, and it's Chris Zannetos. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Brent. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, Chris. A lot of candidates out for the Medfield residents that they can vote on, but we're looking for some of the things that might separate you from the pack at this point. And I'm not going to lie to you, going through your website, one of the things I saw, you're probably comfortable separating yourself from the pack as a avid bike rider as you are, right?
That is correct. I am. I bike to work when I can, commute into Boston to my company, and I've been biking through every town in the district at least once.
I saw that, the Tour of the Fourth, and you were right down the street at Will's Hardware. People will definitely recognize that. I saw it in the thumbnail. But next time you're around, you're going to have to stop by the big sign of Medfield TV.
I'd like to. Actually, I think I rode by it, but it was during the time in COVID when people were just not going places.
Yeah, absolutely. But definitely appreciate you literally riding through town.
Absolutely. Fantastic. I mean, well, how do you go and meet people? And actually, it's given me a great perspective on what people find interesting. We were just discussing that a little bit. You know, sitting and talking to like the family-owned businesses, which are so important to the town, and just understanding the town has been awesome. And I'm happy to share some stories about that if appropriate later. There are some really inspiring stories.
Absolutely, absolutely. Talk about inspiring stories. One is your family growing up, father coming over with only $100 in his pocket and a scholarship to his name. Tell me about growing up like that.
You know, we lived the American dream, my family. My father did come here with just about nothing. So the scholarship he had actually was to a school called Park College in Missouri, which I'm sure you haven't heard of because it went out of business after his first semester. So there he was, you know, this olive-skinned, heavily bearded, heavily accented guy in the Midwest in the early 50s. And somehow he found his way to Kansas University. He worked nights in a paperboard manufacturing company to be able to pay for things. And, you know, eventually made his way to MIT as a grad student. And, you know, he and my mother were able to build this great life for my family. And I had all these opportunities. I got the opportunity to go to MIT without jumping through any of the hurdles he had to get education. And that really has informed a lot of my perspective about how important education is and how important opportunity is, and how, you know, not all of us have the same opportunity, unfortunately, here in the United States.
Going through your website, which is chriszforma.com, one of the things that is obviously a big part of your life is technology, is the actual, you use the term 21st century a lot throughout it, is bringing things to the 21st century, talking about that. You've lived that for a long time now, through your businesses, through that experience. Can you tell me about some of the businesses that you've had and that experience of bringing things to the 21st century?
Sure. So as you noted, I have started businesses. I've started 3 tech companies. In the end, we were able to grow them to create hundreds of jobs in Massachusetts, $250 million of salary for people to pay for mortgages, to help pay for education. And I've worked with just some great people, fantastic folks. And, you know, a lot of my focus has been on how do we make the internet accessible and safe for everybody. And as I think we'd all agree now, there are good things about the internet and there are some bad things about the internet and the technologies that are driving our world. And, you know, as I was building my second company, I went to my head of HR and I said, look, I'm really unhappy about the diversity of our candidate pipeline for the people that we're hiring. And the more I looked into it, the more I began to realize that there were so many people who just didn't have an opportunity to even get to a tech company, to the opportunities that are created for great jobs. And so that led for me working with my team to start working with the Curley School in Jamaica Plain. And, you know, we got to know a lot of, and this is a school that has, you know, at the time it was, I don't know, 85, 90% free lunch. Now, of course, it's all free lunch in Boston. It was majority children of color. And it was people who were underrepresented in the tech world. And we would, throw equipment to them, give money for buying science lab tables, things like that. But we also brought kids to our headquarters to learn about all the different types of jobs, not just the techie tech job, but marketing, sales, everything. And it was clear to me as we did this, how many obstacles they faced that my kids didn't face. And so when I sold the company, I actually started up a nonprofit. I convinced 15 other companies to start doing this. We now do it with 6 Boston public schools. But it really, I think, well, it's clear, right? Technology is changing our world. In many ways good, but in some ways bad. It's driven the elimination of about 20% of the middle class, middle income jobs. And it's also created a higher hurdle for people to actually progress from where they start. And the result is we've got all these jobs being created in the low wage, low end of the skill level. And there's no way for people to improve the situation for their families, seemingly. And when you start peeling away the onion layers, you start seeing, like, one of it is internet access. These kids who we were working with in Boston, they don't have any quality internet access. And that's true of a lot of low income communities. So just as you start peeling away, you understand that there's just one obstacle after another. And that really is what's driving me to get into this race, because, especially now, we've gone through this bull economy, bull market, right? In which left so many people behind and only really delivered for the top 20%. And then we hit the pandemic, which hits middle and lower income Americans harder. So we're behind being behind. It's, I think it's time that we start training people, educating our kids and adults for the jobs of this century. And by the way, they're not all techie tech jobs, right? Like, I'm in cybersecurity. You don't need a 4-year college degree and spend, $250,000 to get into cybersecurity, or you shouldn't. Now, companies go out and they look for people with 4-year college degrees. And that's why I started a program with Mass Bay to enable 1 to 2 year community college graduates to be able to get into cybersecurity. And that's what we need to do.
One of the things that I saw was that video that you have on your website with your employees talking about having worked for you. An incredible statement of your character and who you are for your employees to come out like that. What was that like to have them make statements, things talking about your creation of hundreds of jobs, you cut your own pay when things were getting a little tough, and then if you received a bonus, you made sure that everyone received a bonus. Those types of statements say a lot about your character.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm a little embarrassed by it, to tell you the truth. I don't like to talk about it. In fact, like, my campaign manager didn't know about those things for like the first 3 months of the campaign. They had no clue until one of my staff members wrote a letter, which he sent to me and I shared with my campaign manager, where he talked about those things. He's like, I can't vote for you. I wish I could do something to help because of these things. And she said to me, is that right? Why didn't you tell me about those things? And like, I guess that makes me not a great politician. I don't like to talk about that, but I'm really proud that people enjoyed working with me, that they felt that I was the right type of leader, and a leader that leads from front. And I really do focus on that. And sadly, in our world today, I think there's too little of that. I don't think it should be notable. I think we should all leaders should be looking to deliver value and progress things for the people who they're trying to lead before themselves. This is what my father taught me. This is what my mother taught me. So, honestly, I don't see it as something that should be rare, but unfortunately, sometimes, particularly as we look down to Washington, it looks to be a little rare. But you know what? We need to remind ourselves that there are a lot of people who do this. Can I give you a story? I'm sorry to digress.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I want to share a story from my bike ride, which illustrates this, right? So I was riding through Taunton and I stopped in at the Pearl restaurant. This was at the height of some of the worst parts of the COVID epidemic here in Massachusetts. And as I, sort of parked my bike, I looked, and in the alleyway next to it, there were 2 women who had a table and were sort of handing out food to people, who came to buy food. And I thought nothing of it. And I went and I talked to the owner, Odette Costa. And she says, come back to my back room. to the banquet area. So I go back there, and there are these piles of fabric and 6 sewing machines. And she says, there are 6 women who came to me and said, can we use your restaurant as a place to make masks for people who are homeless and people who can't afford them? And she said, sure, absolutely. And I thought to myself, this is a reminder of the strength of our community. And she said, oh, actually, some of the women who are out on the side are some of the sewers. And you can talk, let's go talk to them. I said, oh, the people who are doing your takeout. And she said, oh no, that's not my takeout. They own a catering company that lost all of their business. So I told them, come here and sell some of your food right next to my restaurant. Now can you believe that? She set people up to compete with her business, which was already struggling. Now, I've met a lot of people like this. And to me, this is what's inspiring, is that our people are actually, they're very good. We've got to talk to each other a little bit more. And as a community, we can be so much better than we are sometimes, and certainly better than we are individually. So there are people out there like that. So I just love that visit. It was awesome.
It certainly is a fantastic story. I'm glad you shared it with us. Chris, you know, you mentioned not being able to talk about those things might make you a bad politician, but I think there's a lot of people who would argue that in fact makes you a pretty great politician as well. So thank you so much for sharing that story. One of the things that I think, again, permeates throughout is your importance on STEM education. You have a nonprofit that you created with this as well. Can you tell us about the nonprofit, and then tell us about, again, you've talked a little bit about it, but the education process that you're looking for, training people, educating them, giving them opportunities?
So a couple of things, right? First of all, it's clear that our educational system has not adapted to the 21st century, right? We've had this technology information revolution, and we see the impact of not preparing for it or adapting to it with COVID, right? I have 2 sisters who are teachers. Seeing them without the necessary training or equipment try to remotely teach their students, struggling with that, very frustrated and passionate about it. It was difficult, and it's clear that that's just sort of like the tip of the iceberg. You know, when you look at our education, kids lose, about 44% of kids lose interest in math and science between 6th and 8th grades because they don't get this sort of experiential learning to sort of explain why is this important. And I think that's an area of great importance for us to start driving, because the growth jobs are tech related. Now, don't get me wrong, they're not all in technology companies. Cybersecurity jobs are available in every industry: healthcare, automotive, parts, you know, manufacturing, everything. And they're good jobs, and entry-level jobs can be $50,000 to $75,000. And lo and behold, companies go out and they look for 4-year college graduates. So I don't think I've mentioned this, in Massachusetts, we have chronically had 9,000 unfilled cybersecurity jobs because companies are looking for 4-year college graduates and they can't find them. So I went around and I talked to a bunch of chief security officers at some great companies like Harvard Pilgrim and State Street and Steward Healthcare, and at tech companies like IBM and Carbon Black and Mimecast. And I asked them, I said, look, do you think we can get a way to prepare people with less than a 4-year degree to fill these positions? Because otherwise they're unfilled, or people ship them out of state or even out of the country. And they all said, yeah, it's worth a try. So we approached Mass Bay, and we created this pilot program, which is ongoing right now, which is create more experiential learning, create paid internships, help with the curriculum of the 1-year cybersecurity certificate program to see if we can build a pipeline for people to get, without having to spend $250,000, right, and spend 4 years out of the workforce, can they get into these good jobs? And people in my industry are beginning to call these new collar jobs: cybersecurity, data analytics, environmental technicians, biotech technicians, user design and experience technicians, for want of a better term. There are millions of these jobs that are open right now. We need to train our people. And what that means to me is K through 12, we got to drive STEM learning so that kids are interested, make it hands-on, where they get the background and the basis for it. and then invest in these 1 to 2 year programs, vocational schools and in community colleges, to expand them. And frankly, I'm proposing offer a GI Bill-like loan system for people to go get these 1 to 2 year certificates or degrees. And then if they work in the industry, graduate, work in the industry for a couple of years and provide 120 hours of community service, hopefully with K through 12 schools, you forgive the loan. And this can make it totally affordable for us to fill these jobs, which we already need filled. And by the way, within those 2 years, they would have paid more in taxes than the cost of their loan, right? Win-win.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
And let's talk about your education as well. You know, you're talking about higher wages for teachers is one of the things that you're looking at. More support for students, as you've already mentioned a few different times. But one of the other things too is a non-discrimination policy for students, to protect students, I should say. These are things that, you know, you're adding on to the STEM aspect of education. You're really thinking about education as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. So I come at this honestly. My father was a professor. My mother was an administrator at Regis College. My 2 sisters are teachers. My daughter was a 5th grade teacher in Boston. And one of the, and you know, I learned, you know, when you listen, it's amazing what you can learn, right? So I learned from my daughter, for example, that the school that she worked in Boston was 20% larger than my kids' middle school here in Wellesley. And she shared with me that they had 1/8 of the psychologist resource available for the kids, even though it was a 20% larger school. And middle school is a very difficult time for kids, especially now in the age of the internet with cyberbullying and all sorts of stuff. And that just amazed me, right? There are, and again, this is what I think I've said, and I say all the time, is layer after layer of obstacles that some kids that are, you know, not in the wealthier communities face, that create this huge divide that leads to all of these challenges we have. You know, if we fix this divide, more people will have better health care, and they'll have better health, better outcomes, longer, happier, healthier lives. There will be, for those of my friends in my party, the Democrat Party, you know, if people aren't desperate because they don't see a way to get ahead, of build a better life for their family, they're not going to vote for someone who is a snake oil salesman, who's a, you know, who tries to fool them with as a false prophet, right? So I think that the root of so many of our problems is this economic divide and all of the layers of inequality in the society that keeps that divide and actually makes it even greater and greater every year.
Absolutely. One of the things you talk about, the 21st century infrastructure as well, moving forward. You have a stat on there that a 1% GDP increase would create 1.5 million new jobs. Tell me about the 21st century infrastructure, because you talk about not only it in the sense of technology, but also transportation, things like that. Tell me about what this.
Yeah, so there are a lot of things in this, and I'll try not to go too long with it, right? But when it comes right down to it, we're in a tough spot, right, to say the least. We've got crises wherever we look: healthcare, institutionalized racism, climate, you know, getting worse every day and harder to fix every day. And we're in the middle of this pandemic and economic catastrophe, right? We had $1 trillion deficit last year. We're going to have somewhere between a $3 and $6 trillion deficit this year. It's just amazing. We have to make every dollar count. So that's why investing infrastructure dollars in areas that will get us a return is so important. One area to get return: public transportation. If we improve public transportation, we make it easier for people to get to better jobs or get to jobs at all. We improve the quality of life for our people. We create construction jobs, and we improve the climate. Because if people start commuting with public transportation, they're going to reduce their emissions by 10% over the course of the year. Similarly, when we implement our wind farm off of our coast here, of our district, every single wind turbine that we implement, that we put in place, will be imported from Europe. We don't make them in the United States. Why not, right? Let's invest in that infrastructure, give incentives to businesses to build those here, create jobs, employ more of our people when we've got 18% unemployment here in Massachusetts, which is going to linger because of this catastrophe. Let's invest in that. Public housing, same thing. Public housing will lead to better health for people, lower health costs. If we put them near where the jobs are, lower commuting, lower emissions, right? Let's be smart. And the final thing I put on there is internet, right? To solve that problem, one of those problems that kids in lower and middle income areas have of not having quality internet, which holds them back in their education. Let's make it like water and electricity, right? Shouldn't we, when you talk about 21st century infrastructure, isn't the internet sort of the equivalent of the electricity and water of the 19th and 20th centuries? Let's make it available to everybody, high quality.
Absolutely. And I think one thing COVID-19 has done is highlighted how important the internet is, especially for students who now had to do remote learning. And I know I've talked to a few different superintendents at this point, and they're talking about using remote learning going forward. And so it's going to continue to be a very important aspect.
Not only for that, how about telehealth? We're now, this pandemic has accelerated trends that we've already started, but they're also trends that have created this divide. So it's just going to make it wider. So now people in lower income communities can't get access to health, can't get even the worst access they already have to healthcare. They get worse than that. We got to fix it. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Some of the other stats that you had on that point, 2.8 million citizens lack convenient access to grocery stores was one of the things that you said. I was shocked by that number. I didn't see that one coming. The other thing too, and I will note, and obviously you have good reasons for it, but you talked about bike-friendly communities, having bike lanes, efficient public transportation. So something that you obviously utilize all the time, but again, to your point, less relying on fossil fuels, less relying on those things, building communities that have jobs near them, building affordable housing near jobs, all those things line up that offering bike lanes, offering those types of things would help in a lot of ways as well.
Absolutely. So yes, I'm partial on the bike side, and my wife would love to have better bike lanes when I'm riding my bike into Boston. She worries a little bit. But you know what? When I go out and I visit some of my friends and customers in California, and I take the Caltrain, they have a whole train that's just for parking your bike in, so that when you get into San Francisco, you can bike to work. Well, I've been waiting for one of those to show up on the commuter rail, because when I don't bike in, I take the commuter rail. I can't even bring my bike on the commuter rail during heavy hours. Well, there are things that we can do that will help us. And I think we should just do it.
Obviously, climate change is a big topic for you as well. So that's one that I think that all of these things they all kind of tie in with each other. But climate change is a big one for you as well. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So we covered some of it, and maybe I'll veer a little bit about why we haven't been able to get enough progress on this. Right. So I've already talked about things like let's invest in growth industries around clean energy, environmental remediation, carbon capture and utilization. We should be able to do that, like investing in wind turbine manufacturing, right? I've talked about investing in things like public transportation and affordable housing in the appropriate places to reduce emissions and commuting. Certainly there are many other pollution issues, right? I was shocked when I heard and read that people of color breathe 21% more pollution on average than the rest of Americans. And, there are a lot of different things that we've got to fix. Now, the real question, and this is one of the big questions, I think, for the voters around the 9 candidates, right, is we can all talk about, and frankly, we all are aligned around this. The data is clear, right? I'm an MIT guy, the data is clear. We're impacting the climate. There will be a tipping point. It gets harder to fix every day. We all agree on that. Well, how can we get action? Well, we've got to admit, right, that the reason that we haven't been able to get great action is that leaders on the other side have been able to paint this as a way that people are going to lose their livelihood, right? And some Republicans have done a very good job of painting it that way, so that there's not enough support to get things done. Well, we should engage with the ones that seriously want to help people with their jobs, to create a way to create jobs as we're dealing with climate. So let's focus first on the climate change areas that we can affect in a way that we create more jobs, and not just more jobs in, in the blue states, right? But more jobs around the United States, so that one, those who are cynical don't have the excuse to use this, and those that are not cynical have a reason to work with us to get it done. And to me, there are so many of our problems when you go to these forums with us. A lot of us are saying the same, we support immigration reform. Well, same sort of thing. Let's be honest about what the underlying reason is that we haven't had progress. And frankly, this is one of the reasons I'm running for Congress, is because I'm tired of hearing people talk about the great things we could accomplish without understanding how we can accomplish them and getting it done. And, we've got to be honest with ourselves here.
Absolutely. Chris, I know your time is running short here, and so I only have a couple more questions for you. One of the things I wanted to mention is, at this point, you've worked with a lot of different access stations, whether it be Milford TV, you had a debate. There was one this past Tuesday as well. You're talking to me now. I'm sure you've talked to other access stations. What has been your experience working with access stations so far? And also, when you get elected, will you continue to utilize access stations?
So to answer the last question, absolutely. So I think that this has given the local access stations an opportunity to shine, this pandemic, right? When you talk to the major television stations, the channel 5s and 7s and 4 and 10, right, and others, they have furloughed a lot of their people. And even beyond that, of course, they're so busy covering some just massive national issues and pandemic issues. They really haven't covered our race very much, really, right? I mean, I even asked one of the stations, are you gonna have a debate, something? And they said, no, we're just gonna put like little snippets from each of you up on our website. Now, like I said, I think this has been the opportunity for the local stations to shine, and they have. They have picked this up. And take it, unsolicited advice, take it and run with it, right? I think that now, like so many other things in our community, like we now understand how essential certain people are to our communities, and hopefully we'll treat them as essential. Public, the local access TV stations, we should probably do the same way, because you're providing a service that no one else is providing right now. So kudos to you and your colleagues.
Well, thank you so much. Final question. Obviously, this is the one probably the most important. At the end of the day, Medfield residents are watching this, and they have a lot of options, a lot of great candidates that are running, but why should they cast their ballot for you?
Sure. So when it comes right down to it, as I think I've shared, right, the 9 candidates, we're all Democrats. We all espouse and believe in our democratic values, right? I think that what differentiates us is our experience and how we're going to go about trying to drive change. So, in today's world where we have this massive economic disruption that already started and is made worse by the pandemic, and people are worried about their jobs and about financial security, and frankly, about the fact that so many of our people have no financial security. I think it is essential that we get people down to Washington who understand how to create growth jobs, who understand how to try to create new paths for people to get to those jobs without requiring them to pay for something they can't afford and go deeply, deeply into debt. And that's what I've done. I've created 3 companies. I've created hundreds of jobs. I've been working with community colleges and other schools to create these new paths. There are only 6 people in Congress who have any experience like this. There are more radio talk show hosts than people who have this. By the way, that's very different than local access hosts. Um, and there are none in this race, except for me. Now, the other thing I mentioned was the approach. So the only thing that I've done in politics prior to running for this office was work as an intern for the late Senator Ted Kennedy. And I learned from him that you can be a fierce advocate for your policies and values and find a way to work with people who you don't agree with to get things done. Now, a lot of people in the race, they talk about fighting. I think there are enough fighters down in Washington. I think we need more doers, more people who get things done. If you look at what I did with Mass Bay, I convinced 8 companies to invest $500,000 to work with Mass Bay Community College, an organization they never worked with before, and agreed to recruit on campus because I showed them how it was a win for them as well as a win for Mass Bay and for the students. Win-win, right? What a radical idea to take down to Washington, right? Instead of win-lose. Now, I'm not naive. I know there are a lot of interests down there that fight against all of this. But you know what? We got to start somewhere. We got to lead from the front. And that's why I hope I can earn the vote from the people of Medfield, is because it is due to the experience I bring to help lead us out of this economic catastrophe and rebuild our economy better than it was before, to serve more of our people than it did before, and to do it in a way that actually brings us together.
Chris, thank you so much for joining us on Medfield TV today. Obviously, the Medfield residents have a tough decision going ahead, and I think you've given them a lot of great points as to why they might want to cast their ballot for you. I encourage everyone to go to chriszforma.com to find out more about this great candidate. And obviously, we didn't cover everything today, so there's a lot more to look for. But thank you so much for joining us.
Brett, I'll enjoy talking with you, hopefully after the election as well, to follow through on my answer earlier.